Okay, so today I'm going to tell you all about the Odyssey, but before we get into the actual story itself, let's get a background on the story. The Odyssey is an actual story developed by Homer. Homer was a magnificent poet and has often been dubbed as the greatest Greek poet. Homer is best known for his enormous influence in literature, and two of Homer's most renowned works are the Odyssey and the Iliad. His works account for nearly half of all identifiable Greek literary papyrus finds. And to put that into context, that'd be like if 50% of all books developed today were about cute cats. Anyways, that's besides the point. Let's get back to the Odyssey. Evan, why don't you start us off by talking about the Odyssey?
Okay, so Odysseus is the main character in the Odyssey. Odysseus is from the island of Ithaca, and the story itself is primarily focused on Odysseus and the challenges he faces on his journey home from fighting in the Trojan War. The Iliad leaves one wondering how Odysseus is going to find his way home. Now that I've given a bit of an insight into the Odyssey, let's look at some of the recurring themes. Two of the most prevalent themes in the book are overcoming insurmountable odds and homecoming. There are many times in the book that Odysseus finds himself in execrable situations and is forced to use quick thinking and prior knowledge to try and keep him and his crew alive. Some of the paramount events in the book that I'd like to focus on are the defeating of the Cyclops, the alluring land of the Lotus Eaters, and the killing of the suitors. Ben, why don't you tell us about the defeating of the Cyclops?
The defeating of the Cyclops stands out to me as an important part of the book because this is the part of the book that emphasizes Odysseus' intelligence. How does this emphasize Odysseus' intelligence, you ask? I'll tell you. Odysseus and his crew begin their journey to the land of the Cyclops with little knowledge of the enormous beasts that wander about the land. This knowledge could have proved invaluable to him and his crew. As the group initially embarks onto the island, all seems to be going well and things seem to be on the up, as the group had stumbled upon a large cave with an abundance of crates of milk and cheese and also sheep. This would only prove to be the start of the crew's bad luck. A Cyclops inhabited the cave and in coming home to find Odysseus and his men looting his cave, he was outraged. Odysseus and his men find themselves trapped within the cave by the Cyclops. The Cyclops had placed a large boulder in front of the cave entrance that only he would be able to move, but Odysseus and his quick wits have been able to come up with a clever solution for their said problem. As the conundrum stood, neither man nor group of men within Odysseus' crew would be able to move the boulder. So now the question, or task at hand, was how to convince the Cyclops to move the boulder. Odysseus, having an excess of wine on his ship, decided that the best way to convince a Cyclops to cooperate would be to start by getting him drunk. Only plans fail, and Odysseus is forced to settle for simply spearing the intoxicated Cyclops in the eye with his staff. The shrieking Cyclops alerts, all with his ear-piercing yelps. Cyclops came from all over to help him and moving the boulder to check on their wounded brethren. Odysseus and his crew coordinate their perfect escape. This is just one of the many obstacles in the book that Odysseus finds himself plagued with having to overcome in order to find his way home. Now let's move on to the Lotus Eaters. Evan, why don't you give them an overview of the scene?
The Lotus Eaters was a very alluring land, or the plants of the land are very alluring, as they promote dreaming and lounging. Odysseus and his crew landing on the island are clueless about the plant and know nothing of its harmful qualities. As the crew initially embarks on the island, Odysseus, being the effective leader he is, decides to send out a search party to try and scout the island to make sure it's safe. The unknowing scouts are greeted with warmth by the inhabitants of the island. They're offered food, drinks, and then the lotus flower. After a short time, Odysseus notices something isn't right. His men should have returned to him by now with the news on the island. Sensing this, Odysseus and the remainder of the crew venture into the land of the Lotus Eaters. They find the 3 men from the scouting expedition, all the men under the influence of the lotus flower. Odysseus, trying to determine what's wrong, notices the men's drunken stupor. The men want nothing but to stay with the Lotus Eaters, and have lost all longing for home. Odysseus is enraged by the men's carelessness, and proceeds to drag the men back to the ships. The men fight leaving the land of the Lotus Eaters, and Odysseus is forced to tie them to the mast of the ship. This is one of the many occurrences in the novel in which Odysseus is forced to take control of his crew to help to ensure the success of the voyage homeward. Now why don't we close up our video by focusing on the conclusion of the Odyssey. Ben, tell them about the killing of the suitors.
The suitors are the people that have taken control since Odysseus' leave of absence in Ithaca. They believe that in Odysseus' absence he has grown weak, and many believe that he may have passed in the Trojan War. Odysseus is angered by the suitors taking his power, and he is determined to reclaim his homeland. Now, the real question is, Penelope, Odysseus' wife, believing that Odysseus has returned home to Ithaca, come up with a clever challenge to determine which of the suitors she will marry. The challenge she devises is one very few could complete. The task was to string Odysseus' bow and to fire an arrow through a line of 12 axes. All the suitors failed at this test except one. A man in disguise completed the task and orchestrated an effective upheaval to overthrow the suitors. This man was Odysseus, and in completing the task of stringing his bow and launching the arrow, spiraling through all 12 axes. He then fires an arrow in a triumphant manner through the throat of Antinous. Antinous was one of the leading suitors, and Odysseus despised Antinous for helping to lead the suitors to overtaking his power in the past. Needless to say, Odysseus had his revenge. The battle that ensued after the firing of the arrow through Antinous' throat was short-lived and was an exemplary display of military superiority. Odysseus and his men overcame the disorderly suitors with ease, and this is the point in the story where Odysseus is finally relieved of all his stresses that came with his absence from Ithaca. The story closes with Odysseus taking an ostentatious victory over the suitors and finally being content with staying right where he was in the home of Ithaca.
When life leaves you high and dry, I'll be at your door tonight if you need help, if you need help. I'll shut down the city lights, I'll lie, cheat, I'll beg and bribe to make you well, to make you